The dust hadn't even settled on Jacob's grave when Hank Cartwright came calling. Martha stood on her porch, black morning dress catching the harsh Arizona wind, watching three riders approach her homestead. She recognized Cartwright's bulky frame in the saddle, the same man who'd been eyeing her land for years, waiting like a vulture. Mrs. Coleman. Cartwright's voice dripped with false sympathy as he dismounted. Terrible shame about Jacob. Heart attack, they said. A man that young. Martha's jaw tightened. She knew it wasn't his heart. The bruises she'd washed from her husband's body told a different story, one the town was too scared to speak aloud. What do you want, Hank? He smiled, tobacco-stained teeth showing through his beard. Well now, a widow woman can't run a cattle ranch alone. I'm prepared to make you a generous offer. $500 for the whole spread. $500. Her husband had died protecting land worth $10,000. Get off my property. Cartwright's smile died. His men flanked him, hands hovering near their guns. He took a step forward, then another, climbing her porch steps with deliberate menace. You don't understand your situation, Martha. Things can get mighty difficult for a woman alone out here. Accidents happen. Fires start. Cattle disappear. He never finished the sentence. The cold steel of a Colt .45 pressed hard against his gut stopped him mid-word. Martha's hand was steady, the hammer already cocked. You were saying, Hank? Subscribe to see what happens next. Where are you watching from? Drop your city and country in the comments below. The color drained from Hank Cartwright's face as he felt the pressure of the revolver against his stomach. His eyes darted down to confirm what his gut already knew. Martha Coleman wasn't bluffing. Now, Mrs. Coleman, let's not do anything hasty, he stammered, raising his hand slowly. Hasty? Martha's voice was ice. You mean like whatever happened to my Jacob 3 nights ago? That kind of hasty. Cartwright's men reached for their weapons, but Martha's eyes never left Hank's face. Tell your dogs to stand down, or the undertaker will be measuring you for a pine box before sundown. The ranch foreman, a scar man named Pike, spoke up. Boss, we can. Stand down. Cartwright barked, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. He'd underestimated the widow. Most women in these parts would have crumbled, packed their bags, and taken whatever pittance was offered. But Martha Coleman wasn't most women. She'd grown up on the frontier, daughter of a Texas Ranger. Her father had taught her to shoot before she could properly read. She'd outdrawn grown men at 14. Jacob had loved that about her, her steel spine, her unwillingness to bend. Here's what's going to happen, Martha said, her voice steady as a judge passing sentence. You're going to back away real slow. Then you and your boys are going to mount up and ride off my land. And Hank, she pressed the gun harder against his belly. You're never coming back. Cartwright's face flushed red with humiliation and rage. You're making a mistake. You can't fight the whole territory. I've got the sheriff in my pocket, half the town council, and 20 men who'll do whatever I tell them. Then you better tell them to stay clear of the Coleman ranch, Martha replied. Because the next man who sets foot on my property with ill intentions won't get a warning. He'll get a bullet. She pulled the gun back slightly, giving Cartwright room to move. He stumbled backward down the porch steps, nearly losing his footing. His face was a mask of barely controlled fury. This isn't over, he hissed. You just signed your own death warrant, woman. Martha didn't flinch. Get off my land. Cartwright mounted his horse with shaking hands, his pride shattered in front of his men. As they rode toward the gate, he turned back one last time. You've got 1 week to reconsider, Martha. 1 week to take my offer and leave town alive. After that, he drew a finger across his throat. Martha stood on her porch, Colt still in hand, watching them disappear into the dust. Only when they were completely out of sight did she allow herself to exhale. Her hand was trembling now. The gun suddenly felt heavy. She'd just declared war on the most powerful man in the territory, and she was completely alone. Or so she thought. Martha walked back in her house, the Colt still gripped in her hand. The silence pressed down on her like a physical weight. Jacob's empty chair sat by the fireplace, his pipe still resting on the side table where he'd left it 4 nights ago. 4 nights since he'd ridden into town for supplies and come back beaten half to death. She'd begged him to tell her who'd done it, but Jacob had only shaken his head, blood on his lips. "Promise me," he'd whispered with his dying breath. "Promise me you'll leave this place. Take the money from the strongbox and go east. Start over." But Martha couldn't leave. This land was all she had left of him. Every fence post he'd driven, every acre he'd cleared, every dream they'd built together. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Her hand instinctively raised the Colt. "Who is it?" "It's Samuel, ma'am. Samuel Washington. I worked for Mr. Coleman." Martha cracked the door open. A tall black man stood on her porch, hat in his hands, a rifle slung over his shoulder. She recognized him. Jacob had hired him 6 months ago. He was a freedman from Louisiana, quiet but hard-working. "Mr. Washington, what can I do for you?" "Begging your pardon, Mrs. Coleman, but I saw what happened just now with Cartwright." He met her eyes steadily. "I also know what really happened to Mr. Jacob." Martha's breath caught. "What do you know?" "I was in town that night, ma'am. Saw Cartwright's men corner your husband outside the general store. Heard them threaten him. Tell him he had one last chance to sell. When Mr. Jacob refused, Samuel's jaw tightened. They beat him bad. Real bad. Would have killed him right there, but the marshal walked by. Why didn't you tell the sheriff?" Samuel gave her a look that said she already knew the answer. A black man's testimony against a powerful white rancher? In this territory? It would have been his word against Cartwright's money, and Samuel would likely end up at the end of a rope. "I'm telling you now," he said simply, "and I'm telling you something else. You're going to need help if you plan to stand against Cartwright. He won't stop with threats." "I can't pay much," Martha admitted. Jacob's money mostly went into the herd and improvements. "Didn't come here for pay, ma'am." Samuel straightened his shoulders. "Mr. Jacob gave me a chance when nobody else would. Treated me like a man, not property. I owe him my loyalty, and now I owe it to you." Before Martha could respond, another voice called out from the road. "Mrs. Coleman? I'd like a word if you've got a minute." She turned to see a young Mexican vaquero leading his horse through her gate, and behind him, an older Chinese man carrying a shotgun. Her army was gathering. The young vaquero removed his weathered hat, revealing a face barely out of boyhood, but carrying the hard lines of someone who'd seen too much, too soon. "My name is Diego Reyes, Senora. This is Mr. Chunwei." He gestured to the Chinese man beside him, who nodded respectfully. Martha studied them both carefully. "I know you, Diego. You worked for the Martinez Ranch before it burned down last year." "Si, Senora." Diego's eyes darkened. "It didn't just burn. Cartwright wanted that land, too. When Don Martinez refused to sell, his barn caught fire. Then his house. The Don died trying to save his horses." He paused. "Cartwright bought the land from a widow for almost nothing." Chunwei spoke, his English precise despite a heavy accent. "My restaurant in town, Cartwright wanted to buy the building. When I refused, 3 men came at night. Broke windows, destroyed my kitchen, threatened my daughter." He raised the shotgun slightly. "The sheriff did nothing. Said I had no proof." Martha felt anger burning in her chest. "How many others has he destroyed?" "More than you know," Samuel said quietly. "The blacksmith, Tom Murphy. His shop mysteriously collapsed. The Johnsons lost their farm when the bank suddenly called in their loan. Cartwright's got his fingers in everything. So why now?" Martha asked, "Why are you all here?" Diego stepped forward. "Because you're the first person who stood up to him and lived to tell about it. Word spreads fast, Senora. By now, half the territory knows a widow woman put a gun to Cartwright's belly and sent him running. People are talking," Chin added, "saying maybe he's not invincible." Martha shook her head. "I appreciate this, truly, but standing with me could get you all killed. Cartwright won't show mercy." "Mercy?" Samuel's voice was hard. "These men don't know the meaning of the word. They've taken everything from us already. What more can they take? Your lives?" Martha said bluntly. "Then we die fighting," Diego said simply. "Better than dying on our knees." Chunwei nodded in agreement. "In my country, there is a saying, a single stick may smoke, but it will not burn. Together, we make a fire." Martha looked at the 3 men standing in her yard, a black freedman, a Mexican vaquero, and a Chinese immigrant. The very people the town looked down upon, dismissed, considered less than human by men like Cartwright. And yet here they stood, willing to risk everything for a principle, for justice, for a chance to fight back. "All right," Martha said finally. "But if we're doing this, we do it smart. Cartwright has numbers and money, but we have something he doesn't." "What's that, ma'am?" Samuel asked. "Nothing left to lose," Martha replied. "And that makes us dangerous." She looked toward the horizon where Cartwright's ranch lay like a dark stain on the land. "We've got 1 week before he comes back. Let's make sure we're ready." The next 3 days turned Martha's ranch into a fortress. Samuel proved to be more than just a ranch hand. He'd fought in the war, knew tactics and strategy. He walked the property line with Martha, pointing out weak spots and vulnerabilities. "Cartwright will come at night," he explained, kneeling by the eastern fence. "He'll want to burn you out first, scatter the cattle, destroy your livelihood before he finishes you off. So we set up watch posts," Martha said, already thinking ahead. "Cover all approaches. And tripwires here." Samuel pointed to the narrow pass leading from Cartwright's land. "String up some cans with pebbles. Won't stop them, but it'll give us warning." Diego worked with the horses, moving the herd closer to the main house where they could be protected. His skills with a lasso were remarkable. He could rope a post from 50 feet away while riding at full gallop. "My father taught me," he explained when Martha complimented him, "before Cartwright's men killed him and made it look like a riding accident." Shenway surprised them all. The quiet restaurant owner turned out to be a crack shot with a shotgun and had a mind for strategy that rivaled Samuel's. "During the Taiping Rebellion, I was a soldier," he explained while cleaning his weapon. "I know how desperate men fight. Cartwright will not expect resistance. He thinks we are sheep. Then we show him we're wolves," Martha said. On the 4th day, an unexpected visitor arrived. Martha was cleaning her rifle on the porch when she saw the rider approach, a woman on a paint horse, riding like she was born in the saddle. As she got closer, Martha recognized her, Rose McAllister, who ran the town's boarding house. "Rose, what are you doing here?" The older woman dismounted, her face grim. "Came to warn you. Cartwright's been drinking at the saloon, running his mouth. Says he's going to make an example of you. He's hired 6 guns from Santa Fe. Real killers, Martha. They arrived this morning." Martha's stomach tightened. 6 more men. Professional shootists, Rose clarified. "These aren't ranch hands playing tough. These are men who kill for money." She paused. "There's more. The sheriff's leaving town for 3 days, starting tomorrow. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say?" "He's giving Cartwright a free hand," Samuel said, appearing from the barn. Rose nodded. "The whole town knows what's coming. Some folks are scared, some are ashamed, but most are too terrified of Cartwright to help." She reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a rifle. "But I'm not most folks. Jacob Coleman helped me when my husband died, gave me a loan to start my business when the bank wouldn't. I don't forget my debts." Martha felt emotion tighten her throat. "Rose, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," Rose interrupted firmly. "Besides, I was shooting rattlesnakes before you were born, girl. I can handle myself." From the barn, Diego called out, "Senora Martha?" Riders coming from the North Road. Everyone grabbed their weapons and turned toward the approaching dust cloud. For more riders were heading toward the ranch. But these weren't Cartwright's men. Martha's hand relaxed on her rifle as she recognized the lead rider, Tom Murphy, the blacksmith whose shop had mysteriously collapsed 6 months ago. Behind him rode 3 others, Sarah and John Johnson, the farming couple who'd lost their land, and Old Pete, a grizzled prospector who'd been run off his claim. Tom dismounted with a grunt, his massive arms still showing the burn scars from the day his forge had been destroyed. "Heard you were making a stand, Mrs. Coleman. Figured it was about time somebody did." "Tom, you don't have to do this," Martha started, but the big man held up a calloused hand. "Don't have to? Martha, that snake destroyed my livelihood, everything I built. Been working as a day laborer ever since, watching him parade around town like a king." His jaw set hard. "I'm done watching." Sarah Johnson stepped forward, a Winchester cradled in her arms. "We all are. Cartwright's been a plague on this territory for too long. Maybe we can't beat him, but we can sure as hell make him bleed." Damn right. Old Pete spat tobacco juice. I've survived claim jumpers, Apaches, and 2 winters in the Yukon. I ain't scared of some fancy rancher with delusions of empire. Martha looked at the group assembled in her yard. 9 people total, each with their own scars, their own reasons for standing against tyranny. They were ranchers and freedmen, immigrants and outcasts, the people society had pushed to the margins. And they were ready to fight. All right, Martha said, her voice carrying command. If we're doing this, we need a plan. Samuel stepped forward, using a stick to draw in the dirt. Cartwright will expect us to ford up in the house. So we do, but we also set up positions in the barn, the bunkhouse, and behind those rocks by the creek. Create a crossfire. When they come, they'll be in a kill zone. What about the cattle? Diego asked. Move them into the north pasture tonight, Martha decided. If Cartwright wants to stampede them, he'll have to ride right past our guns to do it. Chinwei added, we should light torches around the perimeter. Eliminate the darkness they'll try to use as cover. And I'll rig some surprises, Old Pete said with a wicked grin. Got some dynamite left from my mining days. Won't kill nobody, but it'll sure scare the hell out of him. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ranch, the group made their final preparations. Martha stood on her porch one last time as a woman alone, watching her unlikely army work together with grim determination. Rose approached, handing her a cup of coffee. You know this might not end well, don't you? Martha sipped the bitter brew, her eyes on the horizon. Maybe not, but at least it'll end honest. In the distance, storm clouds were gathering. The reckoning was coming. They came at midnight, just as Samuel predicted. Martha was in the main house with Rose and Chun when the first tripwire rattled. The sound of tin cans clanging cut through the darkness like an alarm bell. Positions, Martha called out. Through the window, she counted at least 15 riders, maybe more in the darkness beyond the torchlight. Cartwright sat on his horse at the back, safely away from the danger, while his hired guns spread out in a semicircle. A voice rang out, Pike, Cartwright's foreman. Mrs. Coleman, Mr. Cartwright's given you one last chance. Come out now, sign the deed, and nobody gets hurt. Martha stepped onto the porch, her Colt visible in the firelight. You're on my land, Pike. That means you're trespassing. Leave now, and nobody gets hurt. Harsh laughter echoed from the darkness. One of the hired guns, a lean man with 2 pistols, called out, Big talk for a widow woman. You got any idea who you're dealing with? I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Martha replied. Cowards who hide behind guns and numbers. Men who beat my husband to death and burned innocent people out of their homes. Last chance, Pike shouted. Go to hell, Martha responded. Pike raised his hand to signal the attack, and all hell broke loose. Old Pete's dynamite charges exploded at the property line, spooking half the horses and throwing 2 riders to the ground. Gunfire erupted from the barn, the bunkhouse, and the rocks, Samuel, Diego, Tom, and the Johnsons opening up in a coordinated volley. The hired guns returned fire, but they were shooting at shadows, at muzzle flashes. Martha's people had the advantage of cover and position. One of the gunmen charged the porch. Martha shot him in the shoulder, spinning him from his saddle. Another tried to flank the barn, but Diego's rope caught him around the neck, yanking him backward. Chunwei's shotgun boomed from an upstairs window, the buckshot tearing into the dirt inches from Pike's horse. The foreman wheeled his mount, shouting orders that were lost in the chaos. For 10 minutes, the night was thunder and smoke and screaming horses. Then, as suddenly as it started, Cartwright's men began to retreat. They'd expected an easy slaughter, a terrified widow. Instead, they'd ridden into an ambush. Fall back! Fall back! Pike shouted, and the survivors galloped into the darkness. As the dust settled, Martha surveyed the scene. 2 of Cartwright's men lay wounded in her yard. 3 riderless horses wandered near the fence. The rest had fled. Samuel emerged from the barn, a graze wound on his arm, but otherwise unharmed. Everyone accounted for. A few scratches, but we're all alive. From the darkness beyond the torchlight, Hank Cartwright's voice roared with impotent rage. This isn't over, Martha. Do you hear me? This isn't over. But his voice was already fading, retreating with his broken army. Martha stood tall on her porch, smoke still rising from her Colt's barrel, and smiled. The widow had won.